It was used to light lamps in homes, make soap, and even lubricate large machinery. Whale oil was in high demand at that time. But there was one problem. The oil was present inside whales' bodies, and because of this, humans began hunting whales, killing them mercilessly, just to obtain the oil. Just to obtain the oil. Gradually, the ocean became a playground for human greed. The story then jumps to the year 1850, where a writer arrives on a small island called Natakit. He goes straight to an old shop and buys a mysterious letter. Harmon takes a letter and shows it to a woman present there, only to discover that the woman is none other than Thomas's wife. Upon seeing the letter, his face changes color. She then goes straight to Thomas. Thomas is now living a quiet life, but the old fears are still evident in his eyes. Just then, Harmon sits down in front of him and says he's willing to give her his entire savings, but in return, he wants to hear Thomas's full story. Upon hearing this, Thomas's face hardens, as it's a story he's never told anyone. He's not even his wife, He angrily tells Harmon to leave, but then his wife intervenes and stops him. She calmly says that perhaps the time has come to tell the truth. Thomas's wife then sits down next to him. She tells him that their situation isn't what it used to be. They're heavily in debt and desperately need money. If they get the money, their life will be much easier. And now, Thomas remains silent for a while, but finally, taking a deep breath, he agrees. Hearing this, Harmon immediately comes in and sits across from Thomas, who begins to tell a story he had never told anyone in his entire life. The story then takes us back to the 1819, where a man named Owen lived with his wife on Nantucket Island, Nantucket Island. Owen's work was extremely dangerous. He would spend months at sea hunting whales to extract oil from their bodies. The sea was his world, and death loomed large. But today was a special day for him, as he was confident that this time he would be made captain of the ship. He arrives at the company's office with complete confidence, believing that this time he will be the captain. The joy is clearly visible on his face. After years of hard work, his dream is finally about to come true. But as soon as he arrives, the atmosphere suddenly changes. The ship's owners tell him that this time their goal is to return with more whale oil than ever before, and they're unwilling to take any risks in this mission. That's why they've decided to appoint someone else as captain of the ship. Upon hearing this, the smile on Owen's face slowly fades. The captaincy is given to a man named George Pollard, who was considered more experienced than him. For a moment, there's complete silence. Owen can't believe what he's hearing because he's been waiting for this day for years. He spent his entire life at sea, risking every opportunity just in the hope that one day he'll become captain. But in the end, his dream is given to someone else, and in that moment, anger and helplessness begin to fill him simultaneously. But compulsion can make a person make decisions they never want to make. Owen desperately needs money. So despite his anger, he has no choice but to accept this mission. He tells the ship's owners that this time he'll agree, but he must give them a written assurance that he will be the captain before the next voyage. The owners agree. George Pollard is then officially appointed captain of the SX, while Owen is given the position of first mate, the second highest responsibility after the captain. The two, along with the entire crew, are now to set out to sea to hunt whales. However, Owen's anger grows within him. He feels betrayed by the ship's owners. When his wife sees him in this state, she too becomes afraid. But Owen, controlling himself, reassures her that everything will be fine. They were deeply in love, and during this time, his wife becomes pregnant. This means that not only Owen's job, but also the future of his future family hinges on this journey. Meanwhile, George Pollard's family is explaining to him that he is no longer just an ordinary man, but a captain. Therefore, he should avoid mixing too much with the people on the ship, but should maintain a distance from them to maintain control. George listens quietly, knowing that being a captain is not only an honor, but also a huge responsibility. Meanwhile, Owen's wife is deeply saddened, but bids him farewell with a heavy heart, knowing that this voyage would last for many months, and the threat of death loomed daily. Owen, along with his entire crew, boarded the massive SX ship and set off on the long journey. Gradually, the ship drifted away from the shore, revealing only endless ocean. The story then returns to the present. Thomas tells Harmon that he was only 14 years old when he first boarded the ship. As he says this, the story takes us back to the past. A 14-year-old boy, Thomas, is seen standing for the first time dreaming of working on a ship. Also present on the ship is Matthew Joy, Owen's close friend. They had worked together for years, and almost the entire crew knew Owen well. In fact, most of the people present wanted Owen to become captain because he was experienced and had everyone's trust. But now the captaincy was held by George Palat, and this was deeply troubling to many. Owen, on the other hand, was given the position of first mate, considered the most powerful position on the ship after the captain. He had considerable authority and, if necessary, could even command the entire ship. Shortly after, the SX begins heading out to sea. The wind is blowing strongly, and George decides to take full advantage of this wind to accelerate the ship. He orders the sails to be opened, and immediately the entire ship springs into action. The crew quickly gets to work. Owen obeys George's command and immediately begins opening the sails. However, a part gets stuck, preventing the sail from opening completely. The crew attempts to fix it, but no one succeeds. Owen, without wasting a moment, climbs aboard. Reaching high above the ship amid the strong winds, he unhooks the stuck sail with his bare hands. Everyone below is watching him closely, as not everyone could do such a task. But seeing all this, George's face begins to change. He begins to realize that the crew still considers Owen the true leader, and this begins to intimidate him. After a while, everyone sits down to eat. During this time, George suddenly brings up Owen's father. In fact, Owen's father was sent to prison years ago, and because of that, Owen spent his childhood as an orphan. When George reveals this in front of everyone, both Owen and Matthew are deeply offended. Owen tries to remain calm, saying that he still has a lot of work to do. He then immediately gets up and goes back to the crew and begins assigning tasks to everyone. But there was one man on the crew who was unwilling to listen to Owen. His name is Henry, and he was a relative of Captain George, and perhaps this is why he felt that no one on the ship could harm him. But Owen immediately rebukes him, saying that it doesn't matter who's related to whom. Everyone on the ship must obey orders. Henry is forced to remain silent. Meanwhile, Thomas's condition worsens as he experiences severe seasickness and begins vomiting. Owen then takes him to the side of the ship, telling him that he'll feel better if he throws everything out. This is where Owen and Thomas have their first real conversation. Owen asks him about his family and learns that Thomas is an orphan, his parents no longer alive. Hearing this, Owen falls silent for a moment, as he himself understands the pain and loneliness of the ship. Hearing this, he tells Thomas that from now on, everyone on this ship is his family. Hearing this, a slight sense of relief appears on Thomas's face for the first time. Another day passes, with the entire crew busy with their work. Suddenly, George issues a new order related to the ship's sails. But upon hearing the order, Owen's face turns serious. He explains that the sea conditions aren't looking good and opening the sails wouldn't be the right decision at this time. But George refuses to listen. He angrily declares that he's the captain of the ship, and everyone here must obey his orders. Initially, the crew reluctantly obeys. But soon, dark clouds appear in the distance, rapidly approaching the ship. The weather continues to worsen, yet George refuses to give the order to close the sails again. In reality, he wants to intimidate the entire crew so that everyone will accept his power and authority. He believes that if he manages to command the ship even in this dangerous weather, everyone will fear him. But as soon as S enters the area of the dark clouds, the atmosphere on the ship changes home. Darkness descends everywhere. Strong winds begin to rock the ship, and the high waves of the sea rise like monsters. Fear is clearly visible on the crew's faces, and then, within moments, the entire ship is caught in a terrible storm. The waves were so dangerous that everyone clutched onto something on the ship to protect themselves because the slightest misstep could throw them straight into the ocean. The sounds of screams, howling winds, and breaking timbers echoed everywhere. At this point, George began to realize he had made a grave mistake, but it was too late. The seawater rapidly entered the ship, and the Essex slowly began to sink. The situation had become so dire that no one had any hope of survival. Yet, all the sailors on board refused to give up. Together, they tried their best to steer the ship out of the storm, and after a long struggle, they finally managed to escape. After the storm subsided, George called Owen to him. He then tells Owen that they must return to Nutchet Island because the ship is badly damaged and needs immediate repairs. George then tells Owen that if he tries to reveal the truth to the crew that the storm was caused by George's wrong decision, he will also tell everyone that Owen had suggested opening the sails. But, in other words, they were now warning each other to keep quiet. But the only difference was that George was still the captain of the ship, while